All right, everybody, we'll get started. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I see we have a nice sized group of us today. That's great, especially for a Friday afternoon. You all get extra points somewhere for hanging tough till late in the afternoon. If you're on the East Coast, it's late in the afternoon. If you're on the West Coast, you still get points because it's still early afternoon, so I'll still give you points. But I appreciate everybody joining me today. We will get ourselves started. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it. And we will dive into week 4 of this experience that we have participated in together. This week, we are going to talk about pulling all of it together. And I'll give you a little scoop about the agenda in just a minute or so. I wanted to remind you that there are the activities online. I'm still making a plea for people to go through them. And just because today is the last webinar, don't think that you couldn't go back in and do them as well. So please feel free, go back into the activities, dive in there, get your hands dirty a little bit, and explore some of the things that were put together. I think that they'll really help extend out the learning of what we were talking about throughout the 4 webinars as we went through together. So I definitely would strongly encourage you to do that when you have time. Maybe not over the weekend. Take a break. But next week, as you dive back into it. So have a chance to look at it. I'll go through, as we go through this afternoon's webinar also, I'll give you a little indicator of the kinds of activities that are up there for this week, just to give you a sense of what's there too. And so hopefully that will kind of wrap up your experience of this topic, this topic of mobile devices in the inclusive classroom. Susan, I see your note there that says you're having trouble figuring out how to get on the forums, and Anna just jumps right on, which is great, and says she'll provide some support. Keep in touch, Susan, and let me know if you're still having problems, and we'll figure it out from there. Because I do want people to experience the activities in the forum and the different resources that are there, because there's quite a few things, a large bunch of stuff up there. So let's dive in. Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it. All right, so our plan for the day. We have a plan. We're going to stick to it. This is it. As we move through, we're going to talk about all of the things. I'm trying to think of a better word. So if you were sitting in my office with me right now, you'd see me moving my hands around in a circle in the middle of the air. All of the outside issues beyond the technology that we face when we try to make sure we can put this together in a classroom, implement it, and have success in our learning environment. And so our big 3 areas for today is we're going to talk about implementation in the classroom, we're going to talk about device management, and a lot of that is going to focus on the idea of working collaboratively with our IT support people. And that's where we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking in that topic, because I think that could be, in many instances, the make or break part of having this work. And so thinking about how to be successful in that will be key. And then also, we'll finally wrap up in our big 3 of areas we'll talk about today. We will wrap up talking about professional development, which I find personally, I think is very, very important. And I don't know how many of you have had an experience where you perhaps show up at the beginning of a school year and you're informed on day 1 that, good news, we have a new technology plan we're going to implement this year, and it involves going Google. Your classroom experience. You have to figure out how to get that to work for your students with disabilities who use technology in order to access the curriculum. And so those things sometimes happen in a vacuum without much professional development. I mean, and I think we could probably all share horror stories of things we were asked to implement and yet we're not provided any technology training or support on how to do that. I was with a group yesterday, and we spent the better part of an afternoon talking about that. In between our discussions about technology, most of our discussions went back to, they always seem to circle around to the idea of, well, that's great, all of this technology is fantastic, all of these tools would be so helpful. How am I going to make sure I understand how to use it in my classroom? How am I going to get the time to use it in my classroom? And so looking at those kind of issues. So we'll dive into that in the professional development area. And I'll give you some ideas of ways you might be able to engage learners, yourself, and other learners around you. So we'll have that at that section a little bit, and that'll be our wrap-up for the day. As we go through, like I said, I'll point you towards the activities that will be related to this week's webinar and tied into this topic. There's going to be 2 different activities, so I'll talk about them when they pop up. I'll give you kind of a sense of what they're going to entail and what we'll be looking for those. All right? So those will pop up, and we'll see that little slide will remind us that that is our time that we'll talk about an activity, and I'll use that moment to give you a little background about it. As we go forward, I'll remind you once again, as I do each time, ask questions as we go. This would be a moment to ask questions about that wrap-up if you had one. If not, that's perfectly fine. I will continue on our merry way here. But as we go through, please make sure you're participating. I do like to hear from, I love to hear from you as we talk, because it really helps to kind of guide the discussion as we move through. So please feel free. Every week I've been giving you one of these kind of dive-in pictures, so let's get started, let's dive in, let's go, and all these other ones. And this week I was feeling very musical, and so we have the Ramones to work us into this. So in their immortal words, hey ho, let's go. We'll dive into this week. We'll see what we get. As I had said to you before, and I'll remind you one more time, please use the chat window. It's there. I'm staring right at it as I talk, so hopefully I'll see your comment. If I don't, please don't be offended. Maybe type it again if I don't see it after a minute. There's our 3 main areas. This really is all about, this week, trying to figure out and trying to synthesize all of the things we have spoken about in the past 3 weeks, and trying, in reality, in some sense, to make sense of it and how it fits into the bigger picture of where we are in our school, in our organization, wherever it is that you work. It doesn't matter. How we take this information, which at times I may give you information in kind of the theoretical ideal situation, or I might share it as an example of how I've seen these devices work in classrooms. But every classroom is different, every school is different, every organization is different. And so what I'm hoping is today, in addition to giving you more of these ideas or things to look out for or areas that we have to focus on, I want you to start putting your mind in that mindset of, okay, how am I going to take all of this info and share it back with people? How am I going to take all this info and really affect change in my classroom? As painless as possible. I think that is obviously our goal, is to make it as painless as possible. I think we can all, again, share stories of issues and times where there were pain associated with some of this, but we try to eliminate that as much as we can, or kind of bring down the severity of some of these struggles that we have in order to get this technology successfully implemented. And so those are our goals for today. We'll start with device management, then we'll jump into implementation, then we'll finish up with professional development. That's kind of the route we'll take today. When we think about professional development on the brain, when we start thinking about device management, jumping into that, this is really less about are devices that we have in our classrooms or the devices that our students use. And this is very much about the infrastructure of our organization that supports these devices. I think that is something that we need to understand, and we need to remember that we are, unless for some reason you're a one-person show and you are your own IT support, which few of us are, and maybe you don't have to interface with other IT people. Most of us have to do that day after day, and we have to find ways to come to an understanding of what that means for the technology supports we're doing and putting in for our students. So when we think about that, and we talk about infrastructure, take a second, think about an idea, and maybe drop it in the chat window if you have one that comes to mind. What is the most important issue in our schools related to infrastructure that we have to navigate? Is there something that it just jumps to mind instantly and you say, oh, you know what? I can't have window, feel free. I'll give you a list on the next slide of just some of the things that come up as part of that issue. But when we think about infrastructure and working within our system and device management and all this other fun stuff that drops up in our world when we start using technology, it rarely has to do with the actual devices themselves. When we think about that, some of the issues we're talking about here don't have anything to do with the actual device that we'll be using. But instead, what we find is a lot of these things are all of those other components. There you go, Maureen. And as I clicked Maureen, you dropped it in there too. Yeah, and Susan, you dropped something in as well. And so the idea of thinking about all of these other fun parts that when you start looking at it have almost nothing to do with the actual end user student. And then using a a mobile device in class for learning. And so we see some of the things that you guys are putting up there. Internet access, filters in place at a district level, and how does that impact the learning as it comes down to our students level, and security pops up. And the idea of lag time and just the ability to get on the internet for certain things. So bandwidth becomes a huge issue. So we look at some of the things that pop up on that list, and you guys did a nice job of hitting on most of them, which was great. These are very real concerns for us, and these have to be addressed at sometimes a different level from where we are at. And I know as a consultant, as I go in and out of schools, I have that unique perspective that other professionals don't get sometimes. Where, you know, if you're working in a school, you're interacting with one IT professional or one IT department. And there's good and bad to that. But when I find when I'm moving through as a consultant is I'm navigating the waters of many IT people and IT departments. And there is good and bad of that also. And so it's interesting when we start thinking about some of these issues that pop up and the things that we have to address with our IT people. So we're looking at the infrastructure, the wireless setup, bandwidth, how we store things and what the servers are like. Are they using cloud-based technology, or are there actual servers somewhere that everybody's using to get to the web? What kind of device management system are we using? We're going to talk about that quite a bit in a couple minutes. And also the level of support. I think those are really interesting things. And, you know, we all get the idea of increasing bandwidth and the filtering to block things, and that's good or bad. But some of it might come down to a simple issue of what is the level of support I can expect in my school? Does my school have a person that is dedicated to my school? Does my district have several people that work across multiple locations? If I have an issue or a concern, am I going to be able to get somebody right away in order to help me, or do I have to go through a process? Most of us, if not all of us, go through some type of process to request support from our IT department. So what does that look like? And I think as we go through, one of the big issues with this, and one of our tricks that we have to continue to build these relationships constantly over time, because if we have an adversarial role or adversarial relationship between our IT people and our instructional people and the support people that work with our instructional people, nothing will get done. And then we have real problems. And so the trick is making sure everybody's on the same page. And what is that page as we move forward? And so thinking about how to combine the two worlds that are living here simultaneously. And so what we have is the educators and the people that are supporting the educators. Their drive is what? Get the tool that works for a student so the student can learn the information and achieve success. That's our goal from the educator perspective and from those support people that work with them, from the technology coaches or whatever our names might be. From the IT perspective, what is their main goal? Their main goal, more times than not, and most of them will be very honest with you and say this, my main goal is the security of the network, is to make sure the network remains up and is working and does not have a problem of any kind. And so what we end up having is we have to find some common ground here and remind people that we have a common goal as we go through this. Our goal is to, yes, make sure the network stays up and is stable, but also your goal as a network person is to have a network up and stable in order for the students to learn. That is the goal there. And I think when we start thinking about questions, and this little list of 4 questions comes from the Principle of Change blog. So this is a whole blog post about this, talking about guiding questions for your IT department. And things that we can start talking about with our IT department to get them a little more aware of our perspective as we become more aware of their perspective. I think that's really important. I think sometimes people get an us versus them mentality, and it's really not that. I think it's not about us and them, it's about we, all of us together. How are we doing this? And so I really like this list of questions because really the first one is the one that sets the stage for everything. What's best for the kids? I had a very interesting experience many years ago, and I'll put it out there and say my relationship with this gentleman has changed significantly in that time. But originally, when we first came into contact with each other, I was a consultant in their district. And as I was going through providing AT for the students, he was the director of the IT department. So anything I needed had to go through him. And so as I would come in out of school, I would meet with students and I would do trials. Most times I would do them on my computer or a loaner computer that I would leave with the student. So this computer was kind of an island of its own. It didn't connect to the network. It didn't get internet access, and that was fine. And it just moved on that way. But what was interesting is that when we started to decide what tools would work for a student and that we wanted to move forward and actually use the tools on the network, I had to go to this person and say, we are purchasing this software for this student, and we need it loaded on the network. And he would, in the beginning, make blanket statements like, no, I'm not loading that on the network because I don't know how secure it is, and I don't want you to impact my network. And we had these discussions, and I would constantly come back and we would talk about this idea of, no, this is for kids. This is for one of the students. This is not me asking you. It's a tool that a student in your district needs in order to be successful. And in the beginning, and I still remember it to this day, it's like one of those things. It's one of those moments we don't talk about with each other, but I still use it as the example, but at least we've grown from there. In one of our first interactions with him, he had said to me, I didn't get into this job to work with kids. I got into this job to work with computers. And I thought, oh, wow. And I said to him in that little exchange, well, then you're in the wrong place because your job is to work with kids on computers. So if you don't want that, this is not the right spot for you. And it took him, and that did not go well. And it took a while after that for us to see eye to eye. But we had a really kind of deep conversation about this, using thoughts about that kind of framed these 4 questions here. What's best for kids? How does it improve learning? If we do this, whatever this is, so just let's say, if we load software, if we load this software program, what's the balance of risk versus reward? And again, the idea of understanding that network security is paramount to this gentleman, and that's fine. But talking to him about the idea of, if you're concerned about the network, I've given the student a loaner laptop with this software on it that he's been using for a couple weeks. Is there a way we can load the software on a workstation that you could evaluate before it gets sent out to the student to make sure it's not going to adversely affect the network? Can we do that? And he would start with that process and say, yeah, okay, I can do that. I'll load it on a workstation that I have in my office, and I will explore it. And then I'll come back to you, and we'll decide. So, okay, fine. And that's what we did. And that was the first step of our process. And what we had over time, like anything else, is a relationship was built, and the recognition of, I understood what his job was there, and I was not trying to sabotage his job with the things I was doing for the network, for the students on the network. And so in that case, now we're at a really, actually, I almost don't like telling that story anymore because we really have had such a dramatic turnaround. I've been consulting in that district for 5+ years now. And now I'm at a point where myself and this gentleman go out and do trainings together on software, and he talks from the IT perspective and I talk from the student perspective, and we do trainings for teachers together, and we've done trainings for the parents to explain to them different rollouts that we're going to do with technology. So I mean, he's really got on board with this, but in the beginning it was a little shaky, and it took some time to understand that. One of the other strategies I used with this same gentleman that I think might have softened him over time is, instead of showing up at his office at the school by myself to talk about what I needed, I played a little dirty, and I would bring the student with me who I wanted to load the software for. And I know, and it's very dirty, but that's just the way it is. I'm going to have to get whatever I can get, however I can get it. And I would bring the student, and when we sat down with him to talk about the technology, I had the student explain what the tool was going to do for them, and have the student talk about the ways he or she had been using the technology for the trial and how good it had been to help them do their activities, whatever they are. And so it was really kind of interesting, and that really brought home the idea of, this is something we are working for to make sure that the students have access to technology. And so who better to explain it if they're able to than the students themselves, which I think is really perfect. And so using that actually turned out to be a very nice thing. And since then, we've kind of instituted in this school a little technology club of all the students that use AT, and we have an opportunity every once in a while to have a few minutes at the IT's meeting that they hold. They hold it every couple months, maybe once a marking period, and the student club gets an opportunity to talk about some of the things they're doing with technology. And Jackie, I think you're right. I think it's that idea of making it's humanizing everything. And I think that's what really helped, is that it made that moment of, oh, wait a second, I'm not just doing things to a computer in a bubble somewhere, in a vacuum. I'm actually doing things to a computer that are impacting some kid somewhere. And so I think that's really was a nice way to make that and kind of drive that point home. I've even gone one step further because of one of the students that's been part of this little group for a couple of years now, is very good at technology. And this kid is in 6th grade? Might be in 5th grade. He's really good at tech. And he has become my little sidekick for the days I'm not in district. And with the IT department's approval, he's been given somewhat, a little bit more latitude within the network than some of the other students. And it's actually kind of funny, is he has the same privileges on the network as the teachers now. So they've bumped him up from the student account to a teacher account. That way, he moves from classroom to classroom in his pod, helping teachers with the technology if they need help. And so it's been really funny how that worked. And Maureen, you're right. I mean, even with students that are multiply disabled, and the students that are in this little group that I mentioned have a range of disabilities. There's several students with learning disabilities. There's a student with a physical disability who uses a wheelchair. And there's actually a student on this group with a cognitive disability who participates. Again, it's really interesting because he is very tech savvy, this one student with the cognitive disability. So he struggles in a lot of his classes, but technology seems to be his little sweet spot, that he really gets it and he really likes it. So he's on the group also. So really kind of funny. But the idea of humanizing. And, you know, I've talked to groups in the past of how can we make better friends with our IT departments, and we've had every solution from make cookies for them to invite them to the teacher parties to any of the other things. I think it really just starts with the idea of understanding everyone's roles, respecting that, and finding a way to come to that common ground. And that common ground is what makes the most sense for the kids. And if you can get to that common ground, then you're good. And then everything kind of works itself out from there. So keep that in mind as you think about your IT department. And I saw Jackie said it before, the idea of teaching IT personnel about education, because they're coming from this from a technology perspective. They might not have much understanding of education and how this works. And so having this partnership, and what's nice is, and even in this one school, we've gotten to a point where the IT guys that I work with, and there's one guy for each school, so there's 4 schools and there's 4 guys, and then there's the director. The guys at the schools are genuinely interested in assistive technology now. And I think that's been a really nice progression I've seen with them over time. There's just been kind of this nice, well, what's new, or what are you going to work on today, or is there something that we should know about? And so they're starting to ask the questions, which is great as we go through. So it's been very exciting. So as we think about this marriage of IT, so now we've gotten ourselves to a happy point with our IT folks, and we're friends now, and everybody's good. We talk about the tools that are going to be put in place. And we talked about this in the past few webinars, this idea of looking at multiple hardware devices, multiple apps, multiple, happens beyond us. And it is something that is somewhat dictated to us. And so we have to be prepared for that in a sense and understand what's going to be put in place. Now that doesn't say that a student who has very significant needs or different needs than everybody else might not see something that's customized, but we talk about what is the overall technology landscape going to look like in our school. And then if you remember that I showed you this picture at some point in the past couple webinars when I talk about apps. Once we've understood our hardware solution or our platform, the next part that has been the new kind of experience with us as service providers supporting students in classes is how to get apps onto devices. And I always leave this picture up because it makes me laugh, and so maybe you'll laugh too, but it makes me laugh. When I think apps in schools, I think the Wild West. It is all over the place. There are different kinds of solutions people have used. Some schools have used no solution and just left it all loose and just let's see what happens. But it really is, and Caroline, I'm glad you're happy with that too, because I really like that. When this picture pops up in any presentation I do, I laugh. It makes me smile. I'm just happy with it. But the idea of how we're going to manage not just the hardware anymore, but the software tools, the apps that we work with. And the other thing we have to consider when we think about that with the apps is as we move forward, there may be a generic student setup. And I see this in a lot of schools. There is a profile. The students have a profile. If you're a Chrome school, everybody has the same Chrome profile, which may be fine for a large percentage of the students. I would argue it's probably not as fine for them as we like to imagine that it's fine. I'm thinking everybody could probably use a little different, but I digress just a little bit. If we do a profile that is everyone kind of set up in the same way, how is that profile able to accommodate the student who is very different in their needs? So how does the individual make sure they get the supports they need too? And so that there is options to do that. And when we think about apps, so I'll talk about apps for a second, because even though the picture on the screen shows the iTunes Store and the Google Play Store, even when we think about Chrome, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, we're talking about the same kind of issue, is what are we going to do if we need to purchase something and get it on these devices? Whether it's a one-to-one scenario where everybody has a device, or whether it's a unique situation that a student has a school-owned device that we need to get apps on, what are we going to do, or how are we going to do that? And I'll just share with you some examples of the ways I've seen different schools do it. I don't know what's right or wrong. It really does depend on your situation. I've seen some schools go as simple as they have gift cards. So whether it's Google gift cards for Google Play for Android, or whether it's iTunes gift cards, and they will gift an app to a profile so that they are giving an app over to someone and just buy them one after another and just do it that way to students. I've seen other students and other schools go, if they use Apple devices, with the volume purchasing program. Again, so now there's a team in place now to purchase apps and move someone forward. Which one's better? I don't know. I don't know. I guess it depends. And I think that's something that has to be thought about, is what makes more sense for your situation and how that's going to move forward and be successful for the students you work with. I think it's interesting in that what I have seen some schools doing, which has been really kind of an interesting little change. For if you think previously, when someone needed AT software, it went through the special ed department and it was approved and purchased and installed, and it was a pretty set process there. It was purchased as equipment. It fell into that line item or whatever the line item was that's associated with that, and it gets purchased. Now I'm seeing some schools who are actually purchasing gift cards under their consumable budget. So just like you'd buy paper and pens and files and anything else, and it's consumable. I have a school that I work in where they buy gift cards and put them in the consumable line of their budget. And then what happens is when a staff member identifies an app that they need, or an educator decides that an app is appropriate for a student, now that goes back to last week and the week before where we talked about evaluating apps and making sure we know which ones are appropriate. So we won't dive back into that now. But it's the thought of, once it's been decided that something is appropriate for a student, whether it comes from an educator, a support service person, whoever it might come from, with these consumable gift cards that they have, they simply buy the app and it gets attached to that student's profile, whether it's a school-owned device and it gets attached to that login that's attached to that device. The other kind of iffy spot, which gets kind of murky real fast, is if students use their own device and a school purchases an app to install on their device. That starts to get a little strange here. And again, I've seen that go well, and I have seen that not go so well with people buying for other people's devices. So something to consider as we go through it. Now, we think about, regardless of what we're going to do, if we're going to think about the idea of managing apps through some kind of volume program, is how do those apps get pushed out to students? And so what does that look like? So maybe the school employs a management tool, like something from Cisco. They use the Meraki system, and it runs all the devices. You can manage and support them that way. And with that, you're managing apps and pushing things out, and you're able to analyze what's being used at any given point. Of course, that's a pay, so you pay for that. You pay per, what do they call it? I think it's per access point is what you pay for. Yeah, and so with that, it depends on how you purchase that and how it would push those things out. If you're a Google school and you're using Chrome and Chromebooks, you could use the Chrome Management Console, and that allows your IT administrator to simply pick apps and extensions and push them out. So what happens is the minute a student logs into their profile, those tools are just automatically there. Now granted, as with anything else that gets automatically pushed out to someone, they have to know it's coming, and they have to have an understanding of what the heck to do with it once it shows up. Because I've had those discussions with IT people too, where they'll say things like, good news, we've pushed out a whole group of apps to the students. And I'll say, okay, that's good. What apps? Well, we found a couple and we thought they might be really helpful, so we pushed them out. And so now we get this interesting spot where there is an effort to be proactive, which we have to respect. But at the same point, we have to remember that and remind people that, well, you can't just push out a tool and assume everyone's going to use it, especially if it's a tool no one's asking for or has identified a need. And so there's that reminder. So the console is good for that, and any of these app management tools are good for that, but it still is a reminder, and it still is an education piece, like we talked about before, of reminding them that just because we can push things out, just because things are free and available doesn't mean they should be available. So keep that in mind too as we go through. And ultimately, before we jump into classroom implementation, make friends with your IT people. I actually find one of the IT guys I work with now in this one school, he's probably the nicest guy I work with in the entire district. And at the beginning, I was like, I don't know if I like this guy. He's funny, he's engaged, he likes working with the kids now, he's got this whole kind of new mindset. So it is really great when that happens and you see that kind of moves forward. When we think about implementation, so now we're talking about the classroom. So we figured out the infrastructure, we've gotten our IT on board, they've pushed out whatever tools we need in the classroom, which is great. We've identified tools that would work, we've gotten them through our process to actually get them to us at the end point as the teacher using it in the classroom. So now we have to start thinking about, well, how are we going to make sure the technology as it gets pushed out is pushed out and used in an appropriate way? And ISTE does a really nice job of breaking this down and talking about technology use. And it is a two option criteria here. It's a two item list, which I like because it's short. And they talk about the idea that technology use should always be driven by two primary criteria. One, and I love this because this is technology anywhere at this point, this should always be one of your driving principles, if not the driving principle. What's appropriate for the task at hand? If the technology does not make sense for the task at hand, don't use it. And this is where we have to talk with our classroom staff and our educators and with each other about the idea of shoehorning technology in just for the sake of having technology there. And that always doesn't work well. If we have a well thought out plan for a lesson and an activity, and that activity does not involve technology and will still achieve the learning goal, don't cram technology into it because it's just going to make it worse somehow. You had it. You had figured it out. The mystery had been solved. The lesson was going to go on and be successful until we started cramming things into it. And so I think that there's this balance that people have to strike with wanting to use technology and being forward-thinking with tech, but remembering that, good teaching is still good teaching, and that's okay if it doesn't use technology. If it does, that's fine too, but it doesn't have to. And that's really important. And ultimately, and there's more to this slide. I'm sorry, I think it came off the bottom of the screen there. But number 2 in that list is how can the activities that we talk about or that we're designing be designed to develop the higher order thinking skills. Remember last time and the time before, we talked about this idea of looking at Bloom's revised taxonomy in relation to technology and how we put our technology in place to make sure it's building these higher level thinking skills. The idea of moving us from remembering and understanding, so moving us from that part of the idea of learning skills and moving us up into applying, analyzing, evaluating, and then ultimately creating. So when we want to move our students up this continuum and make sure as they use it that the technology they're using does that for them. And so it's interesting, and as I started thinking about what to share in this section, I wanted to share some of the things that I found that I share with the teachers I work with. And so that seemed like a good place to start for us here. Thinking about the idea of making sure as we go through some of the mistakes that people make. And so this is a great list that came off a website from Craig Kemp. Craig's a teacher in, I want to say New Zealand, something like that. I feel like it's New Zealand, Australia, somewhere over there. Really cool. But you know what? The points are exactly the same. So the mistakes that teachers make, putting the technology before the pedagogy. So how do they put technology in? And it's the same thing from the ISTE comment from before. It's thinking about, I must use the tech. I'm going to forget everything I know about learning and teaching and those strategies I have, and I'm just going to be technology driven. And that fits in with some of these other ones too. And thinking about another mistake, using the technology as a toy, as a reward. We could have probably a nice long discussion about rewards and things like that, and should technology be a reward. But thinking about technology as a toy in the classroom, this is really interesting. And I had an opportunity to work with a student in one of the schools that I'm at, and this student uses an iPad at home. This is a nonverbal student. And the goal we were trying to accomplish was to use augmentative communication to speak. And what we found was the plan was brought by the parent and kind of worked through with the SLP that we would now look to use the iPad as a communication tool because this student has an iPad at home that they're very good at. That was the words that were given. They were very good at it. I didn't know what that meant, but when I started working with the student, I knew what it meant. They're very good at it. They use it all the time. Okay, so those are the things I get on my little technology survey questionnaire that invites me into the team. So I meet with the team, and I start talking to the parents and the team. So, all right, what does it mean to be good with an iPad? And they said to me, well, this student uses the iPad all the time to watch videos online and play games. I'm like, okay. So right away I'm thinking functionally, I'm like, oh, this is great. They can use it. They understand how to navigate. They understand direct selection. They can do direct selection. I have all these thoughts in my head. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's going to go well. And what I found was that when we got to the AAC part to use it as an on-com device, the student did not want to use it that way because they thought of the iPad as fun. The iPad was a toy. The iPad meant I would be watching videos on YouTube of I can't even think of the name of it, but an angry orange or an obnoxious orange, I don't know, something like that. And there were these videos that just went on and on of this little orange doing things. And that's what the student liked, but they saw it as a toy. And when we used the iPad for communication, the student wanted no part of it because it had already been in their mind identified as something as a toy. So think about that as you move forward and make sure that the technology has a role, and that role is as a learning tool, a tool to support learning. Technology should not be used just to fill time. It should be integrated into lessons appropriately. And then the last mistake that Craig talks about is not utilizing the technology available. So having things there, but then not using them is just as bad as not having them at all. So making sure, and any one of these could be a result of lack of training, opportunity suit. There could be whole bunches of reasons why, but that becomes part of our issue of what happens and why these things end up as not working. We get these mistakes. So when we think about mobile devices and we start using mobile devices and the power of them, I found this on Twitter, and I thought I'd share because I like the idea of it. And this is from Barshinger, who was the gentleman who shared this. I don't know his first name. I know him as Barshinger from Twitter. But it's the idea of stop talking about technology and start talking about learning. So the idea, and he uses some of these, instead of this, we could say this. So instead of saying, yay, my students all have digital portfolios this year, say, yay, my students show evidence of their learning. Focus it back to the learning, and the technology that you're using, which in that case is a digital portfolio, is a tool to get them there to show evidence of learning. So keep that in mind as we move through and we think about technology, is always bring it back to the learning itself, not just the tool. We said it a while back in one of the other webinars, that the technology is a tool. The technology is not the goal itself. The goal is learning. So keep that in mind. And so when we think about an effective tech plan, and we're going to touch on professional development in a second, thinking about the idea of effectively coming up with a plan for technology, focusing on the short term, not the long term. Technology is changing so rapidly now, it almost doesn't make sense to do a 5-year technology plan anymore, because who knows what technology is going to look like in 5 years. As it is, think about technology. The iPad itself is only 5 years old. So, I mean, if you had done a technology plan 5 years ago, or maybe 5.5 years ago, or 6 years ago, that plan didn't even have iPads in it. And now think about how you would use that in class. If you did a plan 3 years ago, it might not have a mention of Chromebooks or cloud-based computing in it. and now this changed. So think of short, not long. Think of the applications you might use and what the features of those applications are, not the actual tools themselves, because tools change. Technology supports change. The features of what those tools do stay the same. And so thinking about that, focus your staff on integration of the tools into their daily classroom and into their activities, and then have a tie to professional development. Without a tie to professional development, we're not going to see success. So as we go through, one of our activities that's posted up on the webpage now for you is thinking about technology you might use and coming up with a sample lesson plan. How would you use that technology to support a lesson you were trying to teach? And on the page in the on the website, on the CTV website, you have a bunch of resources in different areas. So I've broken it down. So there's a chunk of resources that could help you if you're thinking about lesson planning and you're using tablets, or lesson planning in Chromebooks, and lesson planning in Windows devices. And so there's three main chunks there that you could look at and think about how you might incorporate that into the classroom. So as we roll into, it's Jackie, sorry I didn't see your comment. Yeah, so I think Jackie's comment in the chat is really good. It is a catch-22. The technology is there. The students would benefit from the technology. The training, and this last part that we're going to talk about, the professional development, is lagging behind. When we think about that, that's a very real thing. When you think about this, and I'll leave this little comment as just kind of a rhetorical question. If you want to comment in the box, you certainly can. But you think about what type of PD is offered to staff, and what are they given as far as professional development. Part of the problem that we have with professional development is that no choice is given, right? How many of us go to staff development day after staff development day, and we are told, congratulations, you will be going to this session. Whether you want to or not, you've been signed up for it, and that's what you're going to go to. So when you think about that as a method in our schools of providing professional development, you get groups of people that are not engaged, they do not want to be there, and so you're not going to see any movement from that or any success from that. And then, so Jackie commented that PD is often driven by the countywide or district-wide curriculum policies, not driven by classroom needs. And that's exactly the problem. And that's the issue we see a lot of times in our schools as far as it comes to professional development activities is, while you have an opportunity because you have all the staff together, it would be a great moment to do some training on a new tool or a strategy or some way to use tech in the classroom, but perhaps everyone in the district has to participate in bullying training or some other training. Maybe there's a training on Common Core, or if you're doing PARCC testing or one of the other tests, Smarter Balance, you have to go to that training. So everybody goes to that because it's a district-wide initiative, it's a county-wide initiative, perhaps a statewide initiative, whatever it might be. That eats up our professional development time, and then we don't have opportunities to do the kind of PD we might want. And so we have that problem, and this one, the little picture of the people on the right messed up the text, but the text says the 3 types of learners. When you think about PD, when we do PD at different places, you have 3 types of learners that come up. This was an article from Tech Republic, and it just really made me laugh when I read it. I think it's very true if you do any professional development or you're in professional development. You see these 3 people. The lady on the top left is what we call the student. That person's there. They want to learn. They're ready to participate. They want to take the information that's given to them, learn from it, apply it, and make some change. If you're curious right now, on a Friday afternoon at 4:54 p.m. Eastern, what kind of learner you all are, you are those people. the students. You're here, you're ready to learn, you're participating, you're engaged in what we're talking about. The other types of learners, and we'll go to the two people on the right first because that picture just makes me laugh, so we'll go to them first. They call them in this article the tourist. They're there, they are there, but they're not really very involved in the learning. They're not really participating. They're somewhat engaged. They're kind of just driving by the information in a very kind of overall kind of quick glance. They're just looking for perhaps a way to be out of their classroom for the day or something like that, and they're just kind of there. But they'd be perfectly content perhaps to just sit and talk to one of their coworkers during the whole entire time. That might be our second type of learner. Our third learner, which is in the bottom right corner, if you can guess who that might be, this is what they call in the article the prisoner. This is the person that's been told to go somewhere, and this is the person that in essence dares you to teach them something. They're looking at you saying, there is no way you're going to teach me because I'm not going to let you. I'm going to sit here and I am going to just stare at you and give you nothing. And you think about that as we move through and we think about that. These people are in every training session. Now that these pictures are lodged in your brain, you'll see these people at the next thing you go to. You'll know each of these people. Like I said, I was in a training yesterday, and there was about 45 people in the room, and it was day 2 of a 3-day training that our State Department of Ed ran. And I could guarantee you, I could point out each one of these types of people in the room as we go through. Yeah, so as you guys see, and Elise said, you have seen these people in every one. Some of them are not as obvious in some sessions, but they're there. You look and they're there. And it is kind of interesting, and as a facilitator, you have to know that they're there, and how are you going to find some way to engage them in some way, somehow. Some of them you might never, and that's okay. You say, all right, well, that wasn't happening for me today with you, and that's just the way it is. That's okay. But when I think about some of the other ways we can engage staff in professional development, we're starting to see more and more of these now. Thinking about ways to engage learners. And so I put these up here as examples for you as just some of the ideas of what's happening. And if you've never been to an ed camp, I would tell you to look that up right away. The fact that you're here today tells me that you're the right kind of person to go to an ed camp and to benefit from it and participate. But in an ed camp, and a lot of the ideas that I have on this slide, they are participant driven. The teachers or the staff are driving these types of learning. An ed camp, if you've never gone to one, I'll give it to you in a nutshell. You go to an ed camp, it's a day-long training activity, a PD activity. Typically it happens on a Saturday, so right away you have to have people that are motivated to come. But think about that when you get there. There is no schedule for the day. The schedule gets made by the people that are there. People suggest topics to talk about. People present on topics to talk about. People write topics that they would like to have a presentation about. And people get together and learn from each other. And so think about that as some way to engage learners. The district that I keep mentioning to you that I work in, we're going to try this next year as part of the special ed department's own professional development. They get a couple days a year, and the director has given the green light to try this in one. And so myself and a couple other people will be guiding this half day where the special ed teachers will decide what they talk about. And we will do mini ed camp sessions, about 20 minutes or so. And we'll have this for half a day, and we'll just cycle through. So we're going to try that. But some of the other models we think about, again, I'm just looking at Elise's comments and Jackie's comments, and it's hard to motivate people when you're not addressing their need. So if you don't ask them, you'll never address their need. And Elise, you're absolutely right, is that these decisions get made above us sometimes. And so we have to find a way to get these in. And some of these are good for that. A lunch and learn or, so you get together, and we do this in some of the schools I'm in where the special ed teachers have a shared prep time. And so they get together in that prep time and they eat and they share something else too. And so that works really well and they continue to learn. If you're looking at that little chunk there, that second bullet that says the FedEx model, 20% time, Genius Hour, those are all kind of the same thing. And the idea with that being you choose what you want to learn about. So you take a percentage of your time and work on a project or an area that you're interested in, that you are passionate about. And that's a way to have people be engaged in learning and build these skills, but having an opportunity to do that. And I just finished today a great book. I put it in the list on our activity, but I finished a book today. It's called Pure Genius by a man named Don Wettrick. And it talks about the idea of creating a class in a school called an innovation class, where students come in and make up their own projects that they want to work on. And they do that in class, and they're developing these higher level skills. The planning, the organization, collaboration, all of these skills, they're building these higher level skills we want to see them do on projects they are interested in, not a project a teacher thought they were interested in, but themselves. And so that's what that idea is, 20% time or Genius Hour. And then the other comments that are there, thinking about your professional learning network and growing that network, being active on social media in order to do that, to build your network is key. I've said it before to us in this group as we've gone through, but Twitter, if you're not on Twitter, you're missing a huge opportunity to learn from people constantly. And so thinking about that as you grow. And actually what I put together for our second activity was for you to come up with a plan of how to introduce one of these new types of professional development training opportunities to staff at your location. And so I recognize that not all of us have the ability to institute a new PD activity, but what I wanted you to do was come up with a plan that you would be able to use examples and research to show why it might be effective and present that to someone. So I'm not assuming that we're all going to get these put into place as soon as school starts, but I want to start thinking about how you might do that. So that's our activity for our second one as we go through. I see I'm 2 minutes past, I'm sorry. As we wrap up, you guys have been really good with questions as we've gone through, which is awesome. Other questions as we wrap up our webinar. Now the fact that it's after 5 on a Friday, I'm going to keep it any longer than I have to. But you guys have been really great. Maureen, I'll definitely, I'm sure the camp will be awesome. I know it will. It always is. It is so interesting when teachers get together and just have conversations about technology and strategies and tools that they're interested in. It always turns out great. The question in the chat was, what is Create PLNs? Build a professional learning network for yourself, and that's what that means. So find people you can learn from, whether that's online, whether that's individuals at your place of work, wherever you are. Find people to learn from and collaborate with. So think about that as we go through. I see, and Jackie commented, even doing PLNs through Google Hangouts, really good. Especially when you can do things and you don't even have to be in the same area, which is awesome. You have face-to-face, video, audio, sharing, screen sharing, whatever it might be. So it's really fantastic. As we wrap up, a couple minutes late, I thank you for your participation. I thank you for coming this afternoon. And for people who are going to listen to the recording, I thank you for your time you put into this. I thought this was really great. I hope you found it great. Please visit the website and go through some of the activities. You have my contact info is there as well. If you want to reach back out to me, I'm always happy to do that. And I put up the CTD Twitter hashtag is up there too. So if you want to continue conversation, put the hashtag at the back and people will be able to see it and we can continue discussing. And that's right. And John reminds us that that hashtag gets tweeted at all the time. So please definitely do that. All right. So everybody else, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. And again, I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you. Take care.